And I'm going to share my screen just briefly. And as I start out, thank you very much. Greetings, everybody who is here. And I hope that we do get more people coming in. Welcome to Eureka Meet. Ken, this is you from Michigan.
Yeah.
President of the Grand Legacy Corporation. He started inventing in 1979. He's a serial inventor of board and card games which he manufactures and licenses. He's the author of an excellent book, which could be one of the main topics of our talk tonight. And perhaps his well-known card game is Phase 10, invented in 1982, and it's still on the market, which is a remarkable achievement in terms of inventions. It just goes to show the enduring, how enduring quality will just carry through. The book's name is A Simple Plan, 6 Easy Steps to Make Millions with Your Ideas. And it teaches us so much, Ken, so we're really looking forward to the man talking about his book completely. Some of our standard comments that I usually make. Our meeting format is that you will be taking over, and of course there will be Q&A at the end. Ken has also mentioned that he needs to leave exactly at 6:30, so we need to get our questions in on time. Please say hello to us in chat, regardless of whether or not we know you. So tell us where you're from and say hello anyway. It's a Zoom meeting, so if you can, please put on your cameras and then mute yourself, as you know, to avoid outside noises. We know by now, but I remind us, do not disclose anything that's not already in the public domain. And our disclaimers are in place, so it would be your decision to use what you may learn at any one of our meetings. We are recording, as I remind you, and electricity rules in South Africa at the moment. And our host is me for my luck. And our co-host tonight is going to be Dudes Tucson from, how do I say your surname, Dudes? Dudes,
Texan. Yep.
You'll say Texan.
Texan, yeah.
Okay, Texan. Dudes is from the Philippines and he's helping me out as co-host tonight. A quote that I thought would suit you very much, Ken, is you can't use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have. Because it would seem that you just keep on creating things that people like and people want and people use and people buy. Just by the way, coming up, same time, same link, we've got a wonderful Kids Makers Club program coming up. Courtney Laskovich, if anybody recognizes that name, she's mainly the MD of IGA, and she's going to be talking about how to pitch to a company and what to do with the contacts that you've identified. And then Nancy Swears, you know, we've had Nancy before, and she's going to talk about collaborative inventing and negotiating a licensing agreement. So you can see the quality of our speakers really are top stuff. We are not going to have a networking tonight because of all sorts of things, electricity being the main reason. But without too much more ado, Ken, I'd like to hand over to you, and perhaps you'll take over your meeting. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Thank you for having me tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I've never spoken to a group internationally like this. I have spoken all over the US, both in person, mostly in person, but a couple of meetings by Zoom during this COVID era. So it's very interesting for me to speak to your group. Very exciting. You mentioned my game, Phase 10. Just to give you a little background there, Phase 10 is a card game. We also have various other iterations of the game over the last 40 years. It's been in the marketplace. Phase 10 is the second best-selling card game in the world. Uno is number 1. You've probably all heard of Uno. Phase 10 is number 2. So it's available in probably 35 countries. It's in 30 languages. And we have, let me think, it's 30 languages. Yeah, 35 countries, 20 languages. So, so it's sold all over Europe, Australia, New Zealand, North America, and we just entered South America, Central and South America last year, and doing quite well. So a 40-year run on an invention is incredible. It surprises me every time I think about it. I continue to own all the intellectual property, so all the copyrights and trademarks I still own. And I license with Mattel, which is, I'm sure, a toy company you've heard of there in your area as well. They're the largest toy company on any given year between the Mattel and Hasbro. Mattel's either the largest or second largest, depending on how good their year is. Mattel produces the Barbie line of dolls, Hot Wheels cars, and unfortunately for me, they also produce Uno. So Uno has been in the market 50 years, and Mattel, we have our 40th anniversary for Phase 10 this year. And we produced a special anniversary edition. It's only available on Amazon, and it's doing quite well. To give you a little more background, so I started creating games as a 12-year-old in my parents' basement in Detroit. And at 19, I decided to try to get some of those games on the market. So after some trial and error and making some efforts in learning the business and how it works to produce a game, I got my first game on the market. It was a baseball board game, and it was called Dice Baseball. We sold it nationwide to Kmart. Now, Kmart back then, 40 years ago, was the largest retailer in the United States. They're pretty much out of business now. Walmart is the big company. But we got it nationwide with Kmart, and it did okay. But after 6 months or a year, they decided to cut it from their line. And so the buyers told me that, and I decided to try to come up with another game and take some of the lessons I learned in producing the baseball game and apply them toward Phase 10 so I wouldn't make the same mistake twice. So I created Phase 10 in 1981. It hit the shelves nationwide in 1982, and it continues to grow to this day. Last year was our best year ever. And so it's just amazing that it continues to grow in popularity and in distribution around the world. So when I started the game company in 1979, I think it was, in 1982, producing Phase 10, by 1986 or 7, I started licensing. I don't know if you're familiar with licensing in your area, but that's essentially where you own the intellectual property and you either sell the property to another company who goes out and produces it and pays you royalties, or you retain the intellectual property ownership and you license the ability to distribute and manufacture it to another company and they pay you royalties. The latter is what I did. And so I've been receiving royalty income for about 34 years of Phase 10's life. The first 5 or 6 years, I did all the production myself and distributed the game nationwide. So once I started licensing, I had a lot of free time on my hands, and I was in my mid-20s at that point. So I decided to go into some other businesses. And so over the last 35 years, I founded probably 4 or 5 different companies, built them up and sold them. And currently I am the founder and CEO of a private equity firm. We buy businesses and we then take a portion of our profits and we donate it to a Christian university here in Michigan. So we're the only mission-driven private equity firm that I'm aware of. And that's our goal. So we've made a few acquisitions and we will probably acquire 2 or 3 more companies before the year is out. And my job is pretty much to set the vision and to oversee our portfolio companies' management and find acquisition targets. So that's what I do now. I continue to receive, again, as I mentioned, royalty income, and I try to help other inventors. To go to the book, I wrote the book. I think I launched the book in 2020. I think it was 2020. And I coincided the launch of the book with, I think it was either my birthday or the anniversary of Phase 10. I forgot which. Phase 10 was distributed the first time August 10th, 1982. And my birthday is August 1st. I won't tell you what year. So you can guess yourself. Yeah, so I launched the book and it's doing pretty good. Stephen Key, who some of you may know, he's a personal friend. He wrote the foreword to the book, and a couple of times over the last year or two, he's featured me as a speaker. We get a big spike in book sales and a lot of questions, a lot of emails. I try to respond to everyone because for me, helping other inventors is important. Because when I started out, there was no internet, there was no Google. I had to figure out how to start my company and produce my games on my own. And that was a lot of time at libraries and asking a lot of questions of different people. It's much easier to learn from others right now with the internet and people like Stephen and myself who like to give back and help other people launch their products and get their ideas into the marketplace. The book, I call it the 6 Easy Steps to Make Millions, because in my mind, it doesn't really matter what your invention is. And what I mean by that is it doesn't matter if it's a toy or a game or some other consumer product. The path to success is pretty much the same. And the book lays that out. I mean, you have to come up with a good idea. You have to evaluate that idea, which I can't overstate the importance of evaluating that idea, an objective evaluation. And what I mean by an evaluation is you have to determine several things. One, is it truly commercially viable? In other words, will people actually buy this product? You want to know, is it really have a utility to the consumers? I mean, a lot of people, I've talked with, again, probably thousands of inventors, and every inventor thinks their product is the greatest thing since the toaster. And that's fine. You should have enthusiasm for your idea, but you also have to be very objective in approaching delivering that product to the marketplace. Because if you're not objective in evaluating your invention, most of the time I see inventors spend a lot of time and a lot of money trying to bring a product to market, and they have really no idea whether it has commercial viability. So you evaluate that by looking at the competition, by actually talking to people that would be the users of the product. So in other words, if you created a new, let's say a new toaster, for instance, you only want to talk to people and get their input if they actually toast bread, if they like toast. You want to find out what they're currently doing now to toast bread, as in this example. What do they spend? Have they bought a solution? And if they bought a solution, what is lacking in the current solution that might draw them to yours? You might also find out what features they would seek in a new solution. Every invention has to solve a problem or fill a need. So when I say a solution, I'm talking about a solution to the problem. And in this example, the problem is, how do you toast bread effectively and efficiently? So your toaster has to be effective and it has to be efficient. It has to be competitive, price-wise and otherwise, to current solutions that people might opt for. So these are the kinds of questions you need to get answered. And if you answer them yourself, that's wonderful, but you need objective opinions of others. And you do that by getting them to sign a non-disclosure agreement and getting their honest feedback. Once you've done a evaluation and you think you still have commercially viable product in front of you, you then have to go about creating a prototype. Now, I know Stephen often talks more about putting together a sell sheet and maybe a virtual prototype, and that's fine. I'm in the camp where I think you need to physically put together a prototype if it's possible. Now, if you've created a new cell phone, You're talking about a lot of money to create a prototype. That's different. If you created the average consumer product, you should try to create a prototype because it gives you a lot of information that you can't get from a sales sheet. For one, you'll know, you have a better understanding if it actually works, okay? I've seen a lot of people have sketched out inventions, and when it comes to actually making one, they realize it doesn't work, or it doesn't work effectively, or it's not very efficient. And remember I said, if it's your new product is not effective or efficient above the competition, you're not going to be able to be successful. So a prototype will give you that kind of information. Plus you have something you can physically give to other people who can test it and let you know if in fact they like this product, if in fact they would buy it, and what they might pay for it. So these are important aspects of putting together a prototype and why I think it's critical to success. Now, again, if you have a invention that's very expensive to produce, requires innovative technologies, then yeah, prototype might be out of the realm of possibility early on. But there are ways to do that, even if you have a very expensive product to create. We can discuss that some other time. And I do have information in the book on how to approach that. But most inventors have a widget or a product that they could in fact make a prototype by cobbling together parts and pieces from other products and produce something themselves. Once you've done a prototype, then it's time to test that prototype and go through that evaluation, which is the third step of the 6. The fourth step is to create well, in this country, we have what we call a PPP, which is a provisional patent application. I don't know what you might have in your country. And what that does here in the US is it kind of puts you in line to say, hey, I'm the first person to create this invention. However, you don't actually have to file your full-blown patent application. You have a year to do that. So it gives you some more time to test and create before you actually file your patent application. And that application process, whether it's a copyright, a patent, or a trademark, is step 5. And step 6 is going to market. And you have 2 options to go to market. You can start a business that creates your product, or you can license your product to another manufacturer who will then manufacture it, distribute it, and then pay you a royalty. And so there's 2 paths: venturing or licensing. I generally recommend most inventors license, because if you try to venture, you're opening up a whole new can of worms, because not only do you have to have a successfully created invention that has commercial viability, but the second issue you have is now you've got to run a business, and there are a lot of hurdles and issues to deal with there. So most inventors should license their invention. However, there is room for many of them to actually start a business depending on your acumen. If you have business experience, if you have the financial resources, and all the other things associated with running a business, then maybe that's the right path. But for most inventors, it's better to license. I'm happy I licensed phase 10. As I mentioned, I've been licensing for probably 35 years or so of phase 10's 40 years of life. And those 35 years freed me up to do whatever I wanted to do. So it allowed me to start other businesses. As I mentioned before, I built a number of companies that I built up and sold, made good money on those. By licensing, I make more money than I even imagined I would be making, because I don't have the financial risk that the company has. I just sit back and collect royalty checks every quarter. So you can't really beat that. So I recommend licensing to those that have commercially viable invention. And my book talks about how to find licensees, how to approach them. Stephen Key, he talks about that a lot in some of his presentations, and his methodology for doing that is well. Works very well as also. So if you don't have my book, but you have his, I would follow his approach to finding licensees, because it's pretty much the same. As I told you, bring a product from concept or ideation to the market is pretty much the same. If it's a consumer product, the path is the same, doesn't matter what it is. So you just find those licensees, you approach them as I outline in my book and Stephen talks about. And if they offer you a license deal, you negotiate that deal and sit back and collect checks. So it doesn't get much better than that. I know typically when I've spoken, I try to be somewhat brief because my goal is to answer your questions, see how I can help you. So I can tell more of my story. I mean, believe me, it could take hours, but I don't want to take that much time. I want to answer questions you might have. And if you don't have questions, I can go on and tell you more.
Ken, I'll start off and ask you to go back a couple of steps to when you were talking about licensing. We don't really have licensing in South Africa. Way back in your inventing history, you've always had the larger companies like Mattel. And so one would have assumed that, yes, well, you would have thought that Mattel is going to license. But going back in your history, how did you establish finding a company that would license, connected to the steps that they need to take about licensing? I mean, the company that's going to license something must surely have a manufacturing arm or a beyond just placement on shelves and retail space.
Yeah, so let me tell you how that works. First of all, Mattel is my current licensee, but I've only been with them for 12 years. For 20 years prior to that, I was with a very small company, and they built their business around Phase 10. So a licensee does not have to be a major corporation. It could be any company in that market that your invention appeals to. So again, if using the toaster example, you'd go to companies that make toasters. Okay, you don't go to General Motors or I don't know what big auto.
Sure.
Okay, you go to companies that make toasters, and it might be counterintuitive. You might say, well, wait a minute, I'm going to show the competition my new toaster. They already make toasters. Why would I show them my toaster? Well, that's necessary because General Motors or Maytag that makes washing machines, they're not going to go into the toaster business because of your toaster. So you find companies that are already in that space and you approach them. And how you approach them is on a professional level. In other words, you don't write them and say, hey, I've got this new toaster. It's the greatest toaster ever created. We're all going to make millions of dollars. It's wonderful. To get all the hype, just approach them on a professional level, either by email, letter, LinkedIn, however you can reach someone in a president, a vice president of marketing, someone in product development, anyone with any stature can probably direct you. And you want to approach them with a simple paragraph. All you want to know is, do they look at products created by outside entities or outside companies? If they do, they will have a process already in place. And you just follow that process. It usually involves signing a non-disclosure agreement and then either sending them a prototype or a sell sheet or something like that. If they don't, just draw a line through their name and go on to the next. What you don't want to do, though, is don't use the word invention and don't tell them you're an inventor. Because they will shy away. They do not like dealing with inventors per se, because they think half the inventors of the world are nuts, okay? And they often have difficulty with an inventor who's never done this before. They often expect too much from the company. They ask too much. They're too demanding. They're too controlling. They don't really want to let the baby go. Part of them wants to hold on. So they don't want to deal with an inventor. They will deal with a product development professional. Okay. So you position yourself as a product development professional. And that's why you don't talk about the invention per se in that initial approach. You just talk to them, hi, my name is Ken Johnson. My company is Ken Johnson and Associates. We're product development agency. We have developed a product that we think fits well with your product line. And we'd like to know if you look at outside innovation. Okay, do you look at products created from the outside? That's all you want to know. They will answer yes or no. If they say yes, they will have a path that you will follow because they're already doing it. Or if they say no, just draw a line through their name and move on. Just keep it simple, keep it professional.
Just to follow on my question, would you ever approach a manufacturing company directly and not the principal company, shall we say?
Well, that you're approaching a manufacturing company directly. So let's say you created a new iPhone product, something that works with the iPhone, then you reach out to Apple directly. You try to reach someone in product development, someone in marketing at Apple to find out if they look at this outside innovation. So you go directly to the manufacturer. I don't know, does that answer your question?
Not really. I was just thinking, going back to your toaster experience, if I went to the toaster manufacturer,
Yes.
he's not going to license my product.
Yes, he is.
But he will maybe connect me with the company for whom he manufactures.
Well, that's different. You're talking about two different things. So
that's my question. Have you ever approached a manufacturer who's not the licensor, the end?
No, so you have two different entities you're kind of talking about here. You have the manufacturer of record. Okay, so when you look at the package, you see General Motors, you see Apple, you see whoever, right? On the package, that's who you bought it from, right? In the case, to give you an example, in the toy business, Mattel is the manufacturer of record, right, of their toys. The reality is Mattel's toys, most of them are manufactured in China by contractors. Okay, so when you're approaching Mattel in this example, you're not approaching their license, their contract manufacturers, because they're not the manufacturer of record. They're making products for Mattel, but Mattel's name is all over the package. So you're going to approach Mattel, not their contractors. If you look at Apple, Apple doesn't make the iPhone. Another company whose name escapes me right now actually makes the iPhones for Apple. Okay. Apple owns all the IP, but they make them for Apple. They can't make them and sell them. Only Apple sells them. So they make them for Apple under Apple's name, under Apple's specs. They belong to Apple. Apple then distributes them. So you want to approach the Apple, the Mattel, the General Motors, the companies that actually are manufacturers of record, although they don't necessarily produce the product.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions at the moment?
So to give you a little more background, I have started, as I mentioned, several companies. When you found
Sorry, Ken, can I introduce you? Can I interrupt you? Ken, Ken Hawksworth?
I'm the Kenneth of the Kens.
Okay, I'll say you're the Kenneth then. Okay.
Just for tonight. Actually, Ken, you said something that I've not heard from anybody else. And, you know, I try and act like a sponge and gobble up as much information as I can from these sessions. And everybody's got a different take and a different story.
Yeah,
so you're the first one. And it impressed me when you said, don't go and tell them you're an inventor. Go and tell them you're a product developer or your company develops products. And I can only echo strongly what you've just said, because indeed inventors get treated as a weirdo.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Never tell them, don't even use the word invention. Okay. Same thing. They will treat you poorly because they don't really want to deal with inventors. and they don't like the idea of an invention. If you say invention, that means it had an inventor. So don't use those two words in your approach to them at all. Just new products, product development company. I'm a product innovator. Anything like that is better than invention or inventor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Michelle, did you have something to say?
Yeah, and I'm thinking it might be the question that you were possibly going for regarding distributors. Has anyone ever gone to a distributor and asked them if they maybe have a potential buyer for a product that you may ask them to make? Like, is that a possibility? I kind of heard things around that area of like trying to get a buyer, but has that worked, or is that a reasonable kind of thing to ask of a distributor?
So before I answer that, let me make sure I understand what you mean by distributor. Can you detail that a little for me?
Or maybe, hang on, yeah, maybe my choice of wording is the manufacturer. If I have a manufacturer, like, could I, ask them to give a quote on a certain product that I have, and then see if they have channels where they think it might sell well?
Yeah, so let's say you go to in my mind, I call what you're calling a distributor a contract manufacturer.
Yeah, my bad. I'm a newbie, so
Okay.
sorry.
That's okay. So a contract manufacturer is a company that will make a widget or product by contract, okay? Under your terms, under your specs, they will make it for you.
Okay.
They're not necessarily distributors, okay? They're just manufacturers. They produce products, right? As I mentioned with the Mattel example, those companies in China are not distributors, they're just manufacturers. They produce the toys from Mattel. Hasbro does the same thing. So a contract manufacturer is not really a distributor. They just want to make widgets under the label of another company. And that primary company is the one responsible for distribution, and it's technically the manufacturer.
Okay.
So you can approach a contract manufacturer and say, look, I've created this new widget and I want you to quote me how much it would cost based on my specs to produce 10,000 of them. Okay. And they'll say, yes, they'll come back in a couple of weeks and say it's going to cost $17 per widget for us to make it for you. Okay. Now with that information, you can go to a manufacturer who actually distributes whatever it is you've come up with. Toaster in our example, you go to toaster manufacturers and say, hey, I've created this new toaster. Here it is. It's more effective, more efficient, and even cheaper than the current toasters in the marketplace. You guys, need to take a look at this. I'm just talking here. This is not how I really say.
Sure.
And so then they look at it and say, great, awesome. And what will it cost? What do you think it's going to cost to make this? You've already checked with the contractor and you say, based on my understanding, at a quantity of 10,000, it's going to cost about $17. That's good information for them to know.
Okay.
They're thinking, okay, if we take this in, what's it going to retail for? So in other words, will the consumers pay this retail price? And the only way for them to know that is to get an idea what it costs.
What about shipping? You got to factor the shipping in from China now too. So that's
all a part of your cost. So when assuming it's China, it may be somewhere else, but wherever it is you're making it, you're going to factor in shipping costs, container costs, packaging costs. All that's a part of the cost. So let's say it goes from 17 to 1850, okay, per unit. That's what you tell them. It factors in this, that, and the other thing. Now the manufacturer's looking at it and say, okay, yeah, this widget, this toaster is awesome. It is more effective and efficient. She thinks it's going to cost $18.50 at a quantity of 10,000. We know with our power, we can actually go to a higher quantity. We're going to produce 50,000, and we'll take that price down from $18.50 down to $12, right?
okay.
Now they know it's $12. And the reason they want to know that number, again, because they know that whatever it costs to make that product, they will assume it's going to be 4 times that amount at retail.
Right.
So in other words, if it's $10 to make it, it should hit the shelf at 40, because they're going to mark it up to 20, and the retailer's going to mark it up to 40.
Yeah, understood. Okay.
That's why and the reason they need to know that, because again, before they decide whether or not to take your license, they want to know what's going to cost at retail and is it competitive.
Hmm.
So if you don't give them an idea of what it costs at some quantity, they have to figure out all that homework, and they're going to do it anyway. But if you come in the door with that information, it does help.
Yeah,
Plus,
but I mean, yeah,
Go
but I'd be concerned though. Let's say you can, for example, have it made locally, like, you know, in the United States, for example, then you don't have to worry so much about the shipping. So giving a cost alone, yeah, I mean, you have to say this is from China, so you have to include shipping, whereas it may cost more per unit making it in the United States, but there's no shipping costs. You know, and we're not the same type of shipping cost, not the same type.
Generally speaking, though, the shipping cost is negligible.
Is
okay?
it?
If you make a large enough quantity, yes.
What's a large enough? Well, let's say you have a board game. What's a large enough quantity for you typically to make it reasonable?
10,000, 5 to 10,000.
Okay, 5 to 10,000 units would, okay.
Would 5 to 10,000 units of a board game would cost, even with shipping, would cost you less to make it in China than it does in the US.
Okay, good to know. Okay, thank you.
Which is why the major toy game companies produce most of their stuff outside of the US. Not always China, but it's outside of the US.
Okay, yeah. Well, the big guys, they've got all kinds of, you know, deep pockets. So it's, yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Even with their deep pockets, if they made 100,000 in the US and 100,000 in, let's say, China or Belgium, it's going to cost them less to make them in Belgium, okay, or China.
Oh,
yes.
okay. Yeah. Okay.
However, there is a huge difference. For instance, the Phase 10, the original card game, this version of it, okay, it's made here in the US because at the quantity they can make it here, it's cheaper. However, the reason it's cheaper is because it's so dense. This is very heavy, okay, because it's playing cards.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Weight, it costs more to make them and ship them over here. But generally, that's not always true.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll figure this out. It won't scare them because they'll know better. It just gives them some idea, right?
Sure.
You'll know when you're doing your initial evaluation that I talked about that's so critical, you can start to figure out what this is going to cost at retail. Because again, your product has to be one of three things in order to have a chance. It has to be more effective at whatever it does, has to be more efficient at whatever it does, or it has to be cheaper.
Or more fun in the sake of a game. Yeah.
It has to be real fun. Okay. So if it's not one of those three things for a consumer product, and what's best is if it's more than one of these things. Any combination of the two, you've got a good shot at getting it into the market. Okay. But if it's not more effective, more efficient, or cheaper, you don't have a shot. And the only way to know it's cheaper is if you know what it costs to make it. That means
point of difference and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to figure that out.
Thank you.
Okay.
Does anybody else have something else to ask? Ken, I'm going to then step in again.
Okay.
You mentioned earlier in your speech about IP and IP protection, and that you'd gone both routes. One was to have your IP to sell the idea, I would assume at a once-off cost, and the other was to retain the ownership of the IP and then to get ongoing royalties. Which of the two paths would you suggest, and what makes a decision easy? I mean, everybody wants to make money from an invention, a new product, whatever. How did you make up your mind as to which route you're going to take?
Well, that's a good question. So do you sell it outright or do you retain a royalty stream? Now, you can still sell it outright and still get a royalty stream, or you can hold the IP and get a royalty stream. Either way, it's the same thing. You're getting a royalty stream. The other way is to just sell it outright and you get no royalties. So between those two, I mean, naturally, I would say go with the royalty stream. Because if I had sold phase 10 outright back 35 years ago, I would have gotten nothing. I mean, I would have lost out huge in royalties because I couldn't ask for what I get now 35 years ago because it wasn't justifiable. Okay, we didn't have the volume. We weren't selling as many games. I have an app, a Phase 10 app. It's called Phase 10 World Tour that is just exploded in the market. It's number 60 worldwide in terms of app revenue. So
But
that says a lot.
that would make it, that would also make it part of your IP negotiations, would it not? That in
Yes.
fact, any additional
That's a very good.
invention,
Very
any
good.
innovation that comes off the original
Absolutely. Let me
is still your IP.
You're hitting a good point. So let's say you license your product, and I've seen this happen. Mind you, everything I'm telling you is either personal experience or having dealt with other inventors.
Thank you.
And that's a very good point you're making. So let's say you license your IP, and as was the case, my case, I licensed it 35 years ago to a small company, and there was no such thing as the internet. There were no smartphones. You know, you didn't have any of those the media or those products, right? So we could not envision in the license agreement the advent of these things. So you have to be very flexible in your license agreement that if any new iteration of your product is developed, who gets ownership of that is one question. And do you get a royalty? So in the case of my game, Phase 10, about 10 years into it, a totally independent group of inventors came up with a DICE version of Phase 10. But because I own the trademark and the underlying copyright, they could not distribute that DICE version and call it Phase 10 anything because that's my trademark. So I get paid a royalty on a game I didn't even create. Okay, so you want to have control of any new iteration or extension of your brand and the underlying product. And you build that into your license. Does that answer?
Thank you.
Because that
Thank
happened
you.
to me personally. We have probably had 6 or 7 different Phase 10 extensions. We have the original card game, which I showed you, but we have a board game version that's available in Europe. We have a kids version. We have what I call Phase 10 Masters, which plays a little different from the original. We've had one that was exclusively sold to Target, played a little different packaging. We had
But you're using your trademark Phase 10 all the time.
Yes, Phase 10 is always the trademark or brand with these other extensions and names. And the underlying product is usually built around the original copyright, but with variations.
Okay.
So we've got a product line of 5 or 6 different games, all under the name Phase 10, all play somewhat similar in that they're rummy based, but they're different, okay? The board game plays different from the card game. The dice game plays slightly different because you're playing with dice, but the goal is pretty much the same.
Just to sneak in before I come to you, Michelle, have you ever had to defend your trademark, Ken? In the sense that has anybody tried to, I don't know, copy you, make a cheaper version, put out the box in a different color, whatever? But have you ever had to defend anything?
Yes, in 2 ways. One, and I forgot what country it is, Mattel found out there was someone making a version of Phase 10. I mean, they were packaging it, looked like a real game. And I forgot what country it was. I want to say it was Morocco or somewhere, some small country. And Mattel went after them and had them cease and desist. And then with the app, you know, there are a lot of companies that will try to knock off your app and use your name. So we'll go to Google or Apple and say, hey, they're using my name Phase 10 in their app. And they're copying the underlying copyright and everything. And so we go to Google or Apple and say, hey, this is my trademark, they're in violation. So Apple or Google will investigate, and I have to send them my trademark registration. Once they see that, they take it down immediately, because if they don't, now they're liable. Okay, so they take it down immediately. So yes, I've not had to go to court to defend it, but we do have to monitor it, because these things pop up every now and then.
Thank you, Ken. Does anybody else have a question before I go to Michelle? Michelle, go.
Yeah,
for
many
it.
questions.
Oh, sorry, dudes. Michelle, one moment, please.
So I understand from the original phase 10, you get 60 years of IP protection through copyrights. With the further developments of the product, the app, the board game, is that another 60, or is that a different copyright with another 60 years of protection? Or
Good question. If the copyrights are different, yes. In the US, the way it works, it's the lifetime of the author. So I have copyright protection on phase 10 for the rest of my life. And then it's 70 years, 70 years after I'm gone, my heirs have control of that copyright. So I think copyrights are great, because copyrights last a lifetime versus patents. Patents only last 17 years or so. I don't know what it is in your country, about 17 years and they're done. You can't even collect royalties on a license agreement that involves a patent after the patent expires. Okay, so, or once it expires. So copyrights are terrific, lifetime of the author plus 70 years. Now, if you apply for a separate copyright because you got some iteration that's different, then that would apply for that one as well. Lifetime of the author, 70 years. So you're not really gaining anything. It's just going to be your lifetime plus 70 years after you're gone.
Thank you,
And
Michelle. Would you like to go ahead?
trademarks, by the way, trademarks in the US last 10 years. And then every 10 years, you have to kind of renew them. But as long as you're continuing to use that product in trade, it's pretty easy. You just pay a filing fee and you get another 10 years. So they'll last forever as long as you keep them up.
Michelle, would you like to go ahead? We've got about 7 minutes left of Ken.
Okay, I'll try to be short and sweet. And I know that's not, it's
Ken, can I twist your arm for 5 more minutes?
Sure.
okay. Yeah, hopefully I can get this done fast. Yeah, I've got a potential licensee for a game, and I'm curious. He's actually got a very narrowed down distribution for the game, because my game can go many ways. It's a board game, it's a game, it's a puzzle, it's good for educational, for seniors, for young people, and he only covers like puzzles in the assembly required EcoWood category, and he wants an exclusive. So how would you deal with, I mean, I want to be sensitive about it. I've had a few opinions where people say, you know, you got to sign a deal that, you know, does kind of narrow in on what his area is, but do you have any recommendations or suggestions or wording?
Are you here in the US?
I'm in Canada.
Canada, okay.
And my potential licensee is in the US.
Okay, who is it? I might know them.
Hey,
No, you don't.
yeah, I'd rather not say. Great guy, great, yeah.
If it's puzzles, I know who. There's only a couple really good puzzle people here in the U.S., so I got a good idea who it is. But
they're small, so it might not be who you think. So
okay. Anyway, so here's the deal. I get that question a lot. So it's not. It would be unusual for a licensee to not request an exclusive agreement. That's very unusual. If they didn't ask you for an exclusive, I wonder why, because that's always what they ask. And they also usually ask for the license in perpetuity.
are you kidding?
Yes, and that's not a problem. Okay, here's how it works. Exclusivity, you can narrow them down to a specific market segment, big boxes versus specialty, that sort of thing. You understand? So you can have an exclusive to big boxes, so you can only sell it to Walmart and Target and Costco or somebody. And then I can get a separate licensee that's going to sell it to bookstores and online or whatever, right? You can go for that, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Are companies really willing to split up a licensing agreement like that? Because this
Not-
guy, he's got 150 stores. That's it.
Yeah, no, they're not usually willing to do that. So I'm
Okay.
saying if he's willing to do it, great, take the opportunity. If he's not, then that's normal. Usually what happens is a manufacturer will say, look, your name was Michelle, right?
Yes.
I say, look, Michelle, we love your puzzles, awesome. We want to take it in. We want exclusivity, either on a geographical basis or a distribution basis.
Or category.
Category, whatever, but they want exclusivity. Usually they'll say we want to have the exclusive rights domestically, North America, for example. Okay. And then you have the right to set up a separate licensee internationally. But some of them will say, I want it worldwide. So all these requests are normal, okay? What's also normal and scares inventors, but let me reassure you, what they usually want is to have the license in perpetuity. In other words, they have it forever, provided they meet certain hurdles. And that might be a minimum royalty. If you read my book, you'll see, I'm sure you can get it in Canada. But
I'm sure, yeah.
usually there's a minimum royalty you'll request. If they say, look, I want an exclusive deal and we want it in perpetuity, Michelle, you should say, okay, fine. However, you have to pay me this minimum amount in terms of royalties in order to keep that license. That way you ensure that they actually do something.
Yeah.
And there's certain other aspects of the license agreement you'll make that all contingent on. If they violate any of these clauses, you get the license back. So there's nothing wrong with giving them the license in perpetuity under those terms, because now you're going to get paid. You're sure
Regardless. Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's manufacturer A, B, or C. Okay. You can switch from this guy and go to this guy. You're still going to get paid. So it doesn't really matter. The reason they all want in perpetuity agreements, though, is they don't want to take your puzzles, take all the risk getting them into the marketplace, and in 5 years after the agreement expires, you walk away after they built the brand, took all the risk, and then you take it to some other person and get $1 million payday. They don't want that to happen because they've done all the groundwork, they pioneered it, made all the risk. That's why 99.9% of them will ask for the same thing: exclusivity and the license in perpetuity with hurdles.
Yeah, it's just that my puzzle is it's a game first, and he's puzzles first. He's got, I think, 2 games. He's not a game guy, and I'm afraid.
It sounds like he's not the guy you should be licensing.
Unless I can narrow him down to the assembly required. Sorry, I've got a bird screeching in the background.
Okay, if it's primarily a game, you should go to game people.
Okay.
And the people you go to, wouldn't waste your time with Hasbro and Mattel because they're probably not going to do it. Okay. Although their PR campaign is, oh yeah, we'd love to look at outside innovation. Reality is they're not going to do it because it's an unproven brand and they don't want to take the risk. It's the smaller companies around the country that you should go for. Your Goliath is a good one. They're very innovative.
Yeah.
I would also look at what's the one? There's one on the West Coast. I can't think of the name of it right now. But there's a handful of them. You just go to
Grandmaster.
Grandmaster is an awesome one. They are less likely to take the risk as opposed to these second-tier companies. However, they're more likely than Mattel or Hasbro.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I figured out where I could fit in those ones, but I know it's a harder sell to these big guys, so.
It's almost impossible. I won't say it's impossible, but it's almost. Okay.
I will conquer.
Yeah,
okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Oh, you're muted, Celeste. There.
Of course, it doesn't help if you're muted. How can you be heard?
Right.
Sorry to interrupt you there. Thank you very much. It's time to close the meeting, so I'd like to hand over to Kenneth Hawksworth. Kenneth is our chairman, and to say thank you very much, Ken, for coming in. Thank you very much for all the attendees. Can I hand over to you, Ken?
Okay, quickly, I saw Darren had his hand up. I don't know
Oh, I beg
whether,
your pardon, Darren, I didn't see you. Please go ahead.
is it a quickie?
Are you waving?
You're muted,
Darren, have you
Darren.
got a question?
Yeah, I'm trying to unmute, but the space bar wouldn't work. No, I didn't want to say anything, but thank you,
Okay.
Ken. I really enjoyed that. It was very informative. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
It was Clark. Clark, would you like to?
He kind of answered the question for Michelle, so he kind of answered my question about
Okay.
where to go in gaming on like a second tier,
Second tier.
where to start on a second tier of gaming companies. Like what should you research gaming companies and then just, you know, board game companies?
Here's how you research. I don't know what kind of game you have, but let's say it's a party game, like Boulder Dash or you know, that kind of game. You got a group of people around it. Let's just use that as an example. You go to party game companies, okay? Companies that make games in a similar category. And you find them by simply walk down the aisles of Walmart, Target, and I don't know where you are, but in the US we have like Barnes and Noble or Books A Million. You want to go to one of the big bookstores because they have a huge game section. And they're considered a specialty retailer. So you go to the two big boxes, which dominate the market, by the way, and then you go to specialty, find a specialty retailer, and just walk down the aisle and see who the manufacturers are. You know, take a picture of their name, reach out to them either via the internet, LinkedIn or something, and find out if they look at outside games developed. The second tier companies, most of them will. It's unlike most of the other consumer products I've been talking to the group about. The game industry is a little more innovative, and they look at outside ideas. In fact, they welcome them. Most games are created by independent people like you and me. So they welcome them. And so you look for those companies, reach out to them, ask them what their process is. They'll explain it to you. Just follow the process. And if you get a license offer, contact me because I can help you work through that license agreement. Okay?
That's awesome.
All right.
So there's board game conventions. Is there a trade show for board games that have you been to in the past? I haven't.
This show, of course, Toy Fair in New York is the biggest. It's also very expensive, and I don't usually recommend it. I recommend in Chicago, there's one. It was called ChiTag, CHITAG. They recently changed their name to POP, People of Play, I think. It's run by Mary Cousins. I recommend that highly. You get a chance to sit elbow to elbow with the manufacturers casually in this conference setting. Talk to them about your idea. You get to pitch it to them. That's the best, most welcoming environment for new game inventors. It's held every November, you know, COVID being the exception, but it's November in Chicago, usually the weekend before Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
If you decide to go there, reach out to me also, because I'd be glad to meet you there, and I can point out the people you should be talking to.
Thank you. Awesome.
Makes me want to come to Chicago, Ken, with a game in my head.
There you go.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you, Ken. I mean, really down to earth, practical, very straightforward, no nonsense talk. And I congratulate you on that. And I know that information you've shared has been absorbed like a sponge by the people who've been watching you. And hopefully they'll put it to good use. So I'd like to thank you on behalf of everybody that tuned in. And I wish you well. Maybe you'll get some contacts from some of our people one day who are seeking advice from you, because you certainly are a mine of information.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Hoping to get Phase 10 distributed in South Africa in a big way here soon. So be on the lookout.
Okay, that's great.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank you very much, Ken. Okay, people, unfortunately, because of all sorts of funny shenanigans, we're not going to have our 30-minute networking session, which we are trying to build up for. So I'm going to say bye-bye and thank you very much for coming. I can't
Me too.
pretend I'm not very disappointed that about 35 other people who said they were going to come and it didn't come. So, you know, I don't exactly feel like, you know, Smarty held a party and
We did
nobody
well.
came because you came. So that was really good. Ken, did you want to say something?
Just simply that we had a good meeting. So those who didn't attend missed out.
It's our
and I'm quite
win. It's
impressed with
our
the
win.
quality of the meeting.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
also true.
True, true. Okay,
But-
folks, I must leave. Goodbye. Hope to see you all again.
Cheers. Next week, we've got Courtney Daskovich. It's going to be very interesting. People who know that name
Bye.
will be here, I reckon. Okay. Cheers. Bye-bye,
Bye.
Michelle.
Thanks, everybody. Bye,
Cheers, Mark.
Celeste.
I see that you went to the dock. Came over.
See you, Clark.
Bye-bye, Clark. Kim, bye-bye. Cheers.
Now, perhaps you want to stop, like, click the record button again.
Just a moment. Okay.